This is a Q&A that I'm doing with Julia, and we're going to talk a bit about how this collaboration started and answer questions about Procreate, Procreate Dreams, and any other questions you do have, please post them in the discussion post as well, because we'll be there answering. Let's get started. What inspired us to work on this winter whimsical object illustration in the first place?
I would say, first of all, we met through Skillshare because we're both teaching. You are doing illustration, I'm doing animation, and I think over the years, now it's been a couple of years now, we've been collaborating quite a lot, but mainly, let's say, off screen, right?
Yeah, off screen, yeah.
Yeah, so collaborating for promoting or for taking each other's classes, and I enjoyed this very much. And I think that's my opinion. Everything started when I took one of your classes, which I did actually 2 illustrations because I really loved it. It was with puns, and I created one illustration was called "Lift Your Spirits," and another one with a vampire that says "You are fantastic."
Yeah.
And again, because I really love the class, I made 2 of them. And in that period, end of 2023, and Procreate Dreams was launching. And of course, as an animator, I was super excited about this new tool, and I downloaded it straight away. And then, one of the key features of Procreate Dreams is to be able to communicate super smoothly with Procreate and to drag and drop the project.
Yeah.
And I just made these 2 very cool illustrations I was super proud of, and I thought, let's try it out. And so the moment I dragged the project from that I made with your class to Procreate Dreams, and I started to play around, it clicked, and I thought, how cool it would be if we actually make a sort of collaboration where you teach how to make the illustration and I teach how to bring it to life.
Yeah.
And then I mean, 2 years now, and finally we've done something like that.
And I remember it must have been around the same time that I found you on Skillshare and I took your sticker class and I enjoyed it so much. I remember you sent me some of your prints, your postcards, your stickers. We did some blog posts together. We recorded a long podcast episode together about illustration and animation. And I feel like it just kind of snowballed from there. And I mean, yeah, finally making it happen. So
Yeah, I completely forgot about the pot. It's true, because we already been talking about this, how these 2 worlds collide and how and when they can meet. And I love this topic actually, because I find it super interesting how from the outside, from people not in the industry, it's the same, right? You draw, so illustration, animation, cartoon, comics is
yeah,
the same. But of course it's not, and there are subtle differences. In a way, some other aspects are completely almost opposite.
yeah,
Yeah, I had this also, like here locally, I've been having a co-working with different creatives with different backgrounds, and sometimes we really sit down like, it's so crazy how some things are so similar, some others are completely different. Like one, I think we also mentioned in the podcast we had, it's on YouTube, is how the animation world is very collaborative, and it's usually a team effort where everybody has to need the other person in order to make the film happen.
yeah.
While illustration is such a solo performance, and very often there is the author, the illustrator, and no need for extra help or collaborators.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'd never thought about that before when you mentioned this, that animation, because it is so big, it requires so much that it needs to be a team effort. This is just a given. And illustration, it's a given to just work alone. And when it is a collaboration, it really people go out of their way to be able to make that a collaboration. It's definitely not a given. So, and yeah, we talked about this before. There should be more community and skills overlapping and people using both. And I think that's the whole point with Procreate and Procreate Dreams. That's why it exists, right? Like we have to be able to use both and put our skills and our projects together. So yeah, it
Yeah,
just made sense.
and also because so connected to the project we've done with this collaboration, it's very
Mhm.
nice also to bring to life an illustration. And as we saw, it doesn't have to be or as we will see, it doesn't have to be a complex animation in order to bring to life a still image. And I believe everybody could do it. It doesn't have to be a professional animator in order to put a little bit of life and movement into an illustration.
Yeah, and it's really fun as well. So like basically the way we did it, right, is we came up with this concept together. I did the illustration and then handed it over to you, and then you did the animation part. And then for me to see that animation later on it was like magical. Like I saw the thing that I made moving, which is crazy. As someone who wants to learn animation, but finds it difficult from an illustration background a little bit, or I'm still learning. That was like magical to see.
Yeah, I really love this process. And yeah, we had a little bit of back and forth in the beginning, like brainstorming what could move, how could it move. And I also love to receive your project and see how you imagine things. For example, putting the sparkles here and there. And I was like, this could move. And I was starting, as soon as I go through the layers, I start thinking, what can I move? What can I bring to life? Of course, in our class, we are encouraging students to do the whole thing, to do the illustration and then bring it to life, which I think is very fun and yeah, makes you create your little world, right? But I also want to like give a hint or like suggestion that it would be even cool if they would want to collaborate with each other and start to animate someone else drawing. It's also super fun. I think it really
Yeah.
brings two people's skills together.
Yeah.
I think that it's always nice to open up for collaboration and see how things evolve. Like you would never make the same result project or have the same result without letting some other people in and different inputs.
Yeah. What was our inspiration for this particular style of illustration, like this topic? I mean, we obviously talked about this project and what we really wanted to create. The most important thing was something cozy and whimsical, but also lots of little objects that are little animate that could be little animations, right? Little movements together rather than one big piece. But what I realized it really reminded me of, and what I also love is hidden object books and hidden object games. And this is something that if you grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, you might notice from books. These like books where that are a bit like Where's Waldo, and you have to find objects in a
Mhm.
cabinet and stuff. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I know the name in German because here it's very common. It's Wimmenbi.
Vimmel builder. Yes, that's what it is. Yeah.
And I don't know if there is an English translation, but it's very common here for kids,
Mm.
but not just for kids, to really, yeah, have this whole picture full of details. And
It's not quite like that, but I think the whimsical feel of all those little objects together in a piece, that's I think kind of the vibe that we were trying to go for. And I really like that, especially with I think the animation and all the little movements add to
Mm.
that whimsical feel. It really feels like a sort of building the small little universe, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And I also thought it was the perfect project to kind of test this, bringing an illustration to life with very small and subtle and delicate movements.
Hmm.
Uh, that's, I think, the best way. Like, first of all, is very friendly for beginners. So there is no need to do crazy animation skills or movements.
Yeah.
And also not so much planning because they're very small loops. And secondly, I also thought it's perfect for social media and for sharing it online. It doesn't require, it's not a full animation that requires sound design, or it's just like a GIF or like a subtle animated illustration.
Especially for a beginner in animation like me, those little movements are easier to understand. A big movement, I wouldn't even know where to start with this. Because they're all different type of movements, small ones. It's much easier to understand where to start, I guess.
Yeah, and it's definitely also easier to break down while doing the animation if it's a short loop or a short animation, you don't need, so many breakdowns and key poses. You just plan those 2-3 seconds, and
Yeah.
I like the fact that this could be scaled, like, to, as you said, it could be even more complex with even more little movements. But yeah, I thought it was a nice snack
Yes.
to to kind of let you think of all the possibilities.
Yeah.
And I also like how you try to build it in a way that there are different levels of difficulty in the illustrations. And I
Mm.
did the same with my class, so that there are easier animations or easier elements, and then harder and harder if students feel like they want to test something a little out of the comfort zone or a little harder.
Yeah. Yeah, what I like is that even if, let's say, you only try one thing, so maybe the easiest one would be like the lights or the spider, for example, you still have a full design, like everything is still done with a tiny movement, and you still have a complete illustration with animation, you know?
Exactly. I think that's also the great part of having all these little elements, that
Yeah.
you don't need all of them. Even one or two could work.
How did we decide on this color palette? Because this is something we really did together.
Mhm.
We had a sketch first, and then I really struggled with color because I started off with like, well, this is kind of a cozy winter feel. So I was like, well, blue because it's winter, and they just didn't work. Like I tried a couple of different versions, and then you gave me some feedback, and we kind of found, I think, a palette that now works better. Uh,
Mhm.
but the blue just felt like really cold. And I
Yeah.
think that's a good tip to keep in mind if you are going for a certain theme, for example, a season. You don't always have to stick to those specific colors that you associate with the season, but rather go for something slightly different. You can still the theme through color, but in a different way, I
Yeah.
guess. So instead of going with for example, blue and a lot of white, you can create a lot of warmth and still convey winter, for
Yeah. I
example.
agree.
Yeah.
And it's also staying away from cliches, and it's more, I think,
Yeah.
has more impact. I feel like, first of all, it's very common to struggle with colors for me.
Hmm.
And it's totally fine also telling the students to go back and forth and change your mind and try different ones. And in this case particularly, I think the you were not convinced in the beginning, and in my opinion, what I told you was we needed more contrast and something more like poppy.
Yeah.
And I love the final palette you found is perfect, I think, because with
Mm.
this orange that I mentioned before and the purple really works so well together.
And I think for me at least, working with three main colors usually works well because three is enough to create enough contrast and you have, something warm, something cold, or a neutral color and then, a pop color, one of those.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also my rule kind of to have like a minimal palette. I
Hmm.
always tend to create a minimal palette in which I have a pop of color, something dark because I need for details, and something neutral, as you mentioned, always very important.
Yeah.
Uh, that is not everything bright, but also that you have something a little more subtle, as you did with this cream or white,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So do you need to be good at drawing to start illustrating in Procreate? I mean, it seems kind of obvious, like a rhetorical question, but it's something that I think a lot of people struggle with because they're like, oh, I'm not good enough for, doing this. It seems too complicated. But I mean, it's actually pretty easy, right? Like Procreate, just like Procreate Dreams, has so many great tools and there's so much help. And I think that's also why we chose a project like this. It's not a full one piece that's really complicated. You can kind of decide with the objects what you want to make. And if you actually isolate all of those objects, they're really simple.
Mm.
It looks more complicated because you put them all together, but they're all just like really small little things that you can add your personal touch to, and you can make it as complicated as you want to.
I think this is valid for every technique, not just Procreate. Like,
Hmm.
first of all, one step at a time. It always breaking down the bigger obstacle makes things easier for sure. Anybody can also decide maybe, oh, I don't know how to draw a mouse. you can let it out or maybe draw something else instead.
Actually, the mouse is a good example because it's the mouse and a cat that I really struggle with because I'm terrible at drawing animals. I just don't do it. But because it's part of a larger piece and there's more objects involved, you can kind of hide it. So even if there's one object where like, I'm not very good at this, but like you can just try and the focus isn't on just that piece. It's not like on the mouse alone.
I wanted to say, and then practicing makes you more confident and will make you better and better at drawing mice or anything else.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, this really ties into what you were just saying about making it your own. You can really easily do that with color as well.
Yeah, I agree. The color palette helps a lot to make the world looks like one piece, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's also a matter of textures and brushes. If you use the same kind
Mm.
of textures everywhere in the piece, it really puts the things together and all the elements belong together, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That really does help. And especially because there's so many objects involved, just sticking to maybe like one or two textures and that's it. Like that's more than enough. But that does really help. Yeah, just to have something, a bit of a rougher texture or a noise brush or something that ties it all together. And
Mhm.
I find it quite helpful. I love using textures, but I do get lost in all my brushes with the 5.4 Procreate update. It's easy to search for those brushes, which I also did with finding a certain noise brush. At least you can find them back, and that makes it a bit easier to stick to one texture or find that one thing that you're looking for. The last thing about making it cohesive, I always do this. I add like those little like dots or stars around the piece just to kind of fill up the canvas, but it also helps to create a bit of atmosphere. In this case, a more like a whimsical, wintry feel. And so those like little stars are perfect for it. And they just kind of, if you put them around your piece, it's kind of like you're building a frame. Initially, I didn't have in mind for those to be animated, but then you did this little sparkles. It's just so beautiful. And now I want to go back and like memorize the process because I love that so much. I want to use that in the future more.
Nice. Yeah, I'm happy that you like that. And also because you mentioned it's really like a frame. I think it's a matter of composition and really balance it in an illustration. But
Mm.
it's funny now that you were saying this, and the students they will see it in the other class. It's the same in animation. When I animated those sparkles,
Hmm.
I had to spread those animations in the timeline so that there is always one happening in a different place, so that there is never an empty moment, right?
Oh
And I
yeah,
think
of course.
it's very similar and connected to that. Like in illustration, the illustrator tries to balance the still image, and
Yeah.
the animator tries to balance the time. So I had to kind of shift this loop in different moments. So there was always something going on in the sparkles.
It really adds to the whimsical feel. I really like that. Also, a couple of tips to keep in mind are to save your brushes. I usually say this when there's a lot of brushes involved, just because when brushes get lost, you might want to go back to something and that like your texture might be different. You want to make sure that you save those. Luckily in Procreate, you can just pin them to your recents and that will keep your brushes. But if you're using loads, you can also like copy them, make a new library, which is really handy in the 5.4 update. You just duplicate them, make a library for your project, or even saving them in a layer, like whatever works. In this case, we only used three brushes and two that you really need. So the Jagar one, which is just like a basic monoline brush, and the Billy button, I think it's called. So that one is
Mhm.
the one with the texture. So that one is really
Yeah.
important to keep because there's no other brush that has that specific texture. So it's important to
Mhm.
keep that in mind. In the beginning, I just really wanted to add a noise texture to the background, um, it's just so it doesn't feel so flat. And I knew there was a noise brush somewhere, which is actually in the classic library. So you can just go to library search and then search noise and it will show up for you. It was actually, it's a default Procreate brush, but I also have a bunch of noise brushes saved that I made, and I made a bunch of duplicates and just left them, like noise brush 1, 2, 3. And when you use the search function, everything shows up, which is very
Right.
handy. Super useful for people who are maybe not super organized and they can find their stuff back.
It's very easy to lose brushes.
Yeah, it can be hard to stay organized. And the thing is, like, if you want to be able to, for example, change your colors later or like import your work into Procreate Dreams, you need separate layers. It's just hard to keep track of everything and make sure you're organized. So it's just important to keep in mind, like keep as much as possible separate, and that will make it easier to make changes. For me, that was really handy. Well, for us in this project, that was really handy because we were changing the colors up a bit as well. And then using stuff like clipping masks instead of drawing on top of each other. And then merge them later if you want to, if you're not going to make changes.
Yeah, it's keeping things open for adjustments, for edits.
Yeah, exactly. When setting up the illustration, we were very organized, kept in mind that, we have separate layers for everything. But what is, in your opinion, a beginner mistake, something to avoid when setting up your Procreate file, especially if you want to animate it later?
So this is a little bit of a common, almost a joke in the animation world when you have to animate something coming from an illustrator. Not everybody knows how to do it or how to prepare a file for someone else. And first of all, I want to say it's not just about animation or illustration. Whenever you collaborate with someone and you exchange files, it's very useful to rename layers.
Yeah.
Imagine if you would have to collaborate with another illustrator and they send you this project with 200 layers, and they're all called layer 1, layer 2, layer 3.
Yeah, that happens.
In order to find the one layer you have to switch on and off everything. So the very first, organize the layers in a clear way, maybe also with groups, and rename everything. And this is particularly useful and important in this case in Procreate, because the moment we drag and drop the project, the tracks will automatically rename with the name of the layer. Of course, you can rename things in the Procreate Dreams as well, but it's much easier to do it in advance and reorganize the project before.
Yeah.
And secondly, the second part is the actual division of layers. So another common mistake is, for example, to not have a complete illustration behind the elements. Let's say we have the teapot and the mouse, but you just did the illustration in a way that the moment you turn off the mouse or you move it, behind the mouse there is no background. Let's say there maybe you see how the brush strokes end and there is something missing. This is also very common, and as an illustrator, it's good to think, what do I want to move? And you could even test it. I like to do it in the Procreate file. You can just switch off the layer or kind of even move it and drag it around and see, here, this will move this way. Is it possible?
Yeah.
And in this way, you as an illustrator, but also as an animator later, you can figure out if you created the conditions or like the structure in order to move it. Another thing is, like, are the elements in the right order, in the right position? So if I want the mouse to move underneath or behind the teapot, of course, the layer of the mouse has to be below, right? So that it can hide. For the animation, it's very important if we want to move it, that the moment we drag it down, it disappears. So yeah, those kind of things. And I think in order to think as an animator, you can just literally try in Procreate to move those layers. So you can select the whole layer and move it around and see, can I actually make this happen?
Yeah, you can kind of like animate it yourself by just moving the layer, right? And just kind of like seeing how it goes. I mean, that's essentially how Procreate Dreams works, but the layer actually moves.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think it's a good test to see also, did I draw everything behind the elements, or as an animator later, or you can already do it as an illustrator if you're animating your own illustration. If you don't need to move something, you can just merge all those layers so that you have less tracks or less busy timeline in Procreate Dreams. For example, you gave me all the books, let's say, I don't remember if they were all separated, maybe they were. And it was very nice, as I said, because I appreciate, since we are collaborating, the freedom to decide what to do. But if I had to animate my own illustration, I would be thinking, oh, I'm not going to move books. Books are still. So I'm just going to merge them all in one layer.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this layer is not going to move. It's there, it's in the background, fine. I could even have one big background with all the things that don't move, for example.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But as I said, because we're collaborating, it was even better that you gave me all the layers, and I could think, okay, this I need to move. I let it being a floating layer, and the others that I don't need to move, I can just merge and
Yeah.
have a block that will not bother me later.
So back to the naming the layers, was it okay then to actually put stuff in groups? Because the layers itself were, most of them were not named because the groups were named. Is that still okay, or is that still confusing?
I think in general is okay, as you will see, and the students will see also in my first lesson where I go through your project and I kind of do this thinking out loud. Some of those I had to rename,
Oh, yeah, okay.
but some it's fine if you just name the group. And if you know, let's say, if you know that the group is never going to interact with anything else, you can just have it as a group. Sometimes until you sit down and start thinking about animation, you don't realize things. It happens to me as well. Then I start to work on my own illustration, and then I'm like, oh, I forgot this. I have to go back and add maybe something.
Yeah, that's part of the process.
Yeah.
I think that's it for now. For the rest of our questions, we're going to talk a bit more about animation, dreams, and you can watch in Julia's class.
For the second part of the Q&A, we see each other there.
Exactly, that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.